The 1970s were a wild time for American car design, as the industry struggled with fuel crises, tightening safety regulations, and changing consumer tastes. Some truly bizarre and goofy cars were released. These vehicles were bold, quirky, and sometimes outright strange. Here are 15 of the most goofy American cars from the 1970s that you've probably forgotten. The 1974 AMC Gremlin Levi's Edition was an eccentric take on an already quirky vehicle. By the mid-1970s, the Gremlin had established itself as one of the oddest-looking compact cars on the American market. With its truncated rear end and bulbous front, seemingly a car caught between two ideas. But AMC, known for thinking outside the box, decided to lean even further into the car's uniqueness by collaborating with Levi's. Yes, the same company known for denim jeans. The result was the Gremlin Levi's Edition, a car that looked like it had been draped in denim, turning what was already a funky vehicle into a piece of rolling, fashion-inspired kitsch. At a time when automakers were looking for ways to stand out from the competition, AMC's decision to partner with Levi's was both clever and bizarre. The idea was simple but bold. Upholster the Gremlin seats with denim material, complete with Levi's iconic copper rivets and stitching. The result was a car interior that looked like it had been tailored by a jeans manufacturer, appealing to the fashion-forward, or at least to those with a strong sense of humor. The Levi's branding didn't stop with the seats. It extended to the floor mats and door panels, fully immersing the driver and passengers in the denim aesthetic. The Levi's Edition may have been marketed as a fun, youthful car, but the novelty factor quickly overshadowed any serious automotive appeal. While jeans were a symbol of cool, casual style, covering a car's interior in denim wasn't exactly practical. Denim is a material that's known for its durability in clothing, but it wasn't well suited for the daily wear and tear that car seats endure. The fabric could fade, fray, and stain, making it a maintenance nightmare for owners who treated their cars with the same casual attitude as their jeans. Beyond the denim-clad interior, the Gremlin Levi's Edition didn't offer much in the way of performance. The Gremlin, which was already known for its compact and somewhat awkward design, wasn't built for speed or power. It typically came with a choice between a modest inline-six engine or a slightly more powerful V8. But neither option delivered the kind of driving excitement that could balance out the car's goofiness. The Gremlin was an economy car first and foremost, and the Levi's Edition didn't change that. It simply dressed it up in a memorable, if odd, fashion statement. The exterior of the Levi's Edition remained largely the same as the standard Gremlin, save for some unique touches like Levi's-inspired badges on the fenders. Buyers could choose from a range of bright 1970s colors, but the interior was the real star of the show. The denim seats were more of a conversation piece than a selling point, and while they certainly caught people's attention, they didn't do much to elevate the car's performance or desirability in the long term. As the 1970s wore on, the Levi's Edition Gremlin became emblematic of an era in which automakers were willing to experiment with wild and often impractical ideas in a bid to stand out in a crowded market. The oil crisis of 1973 had led to a surge in demand for smaller, more fuel-efficient cars, and the Gremlin was AMC's answer to that demand. But while it may have been an efficient little car by the standards of the time, the Levi's Edition was never taken seriously as a vehicle. It was more of a novelty item, the kind of car that people remember not for its performance or innovation, but for its oddball personality. The Levi's Edition Gremlin holds a special place in automotive history as one of the most playful and absurd attempts to blend fashion with function. It's remembered today as a symbol of 1970s excess, a time when American car manufacturers were struggling to find their footing in the face of changing consumer demands and economic realities. The denim seats, while a charming nod to pop culture, didn't exactly age well, and today the Levi's Edition is seen more as a curiosity than a classic. However, it remains a beloved oddity among car enthusiasts, particularly those with a soft spot for the quirky, underdog spirit that AMC embodied. In the grand scheme of automotive history, The 1974 AMC Gremlin Levi's edition stands out as one of the goofiest and most memorable examples of how automakers have tried to connect with consumers in unconventional ways. It was a time capsule of 1970s culture, wrapped in denim and stitched with branding, and it endures as one of the most unique cars ever to roll off an assembly line. While it might not have been the most practical or refined vehicle, the Levi's Edition Gremlin certainly made its mark as a fashion-forward oddball in the world of American cars. The 1975 Cadillac Seville was born out of necessity, a product of the economic realities and shifting consumer preferences of the 1970s. At the time, Cadillac was synonymous with large, sprawling land yachts that exuded opulence and excess. However, the oil crisis of the early 70s forced American automakers to rethink their strategy, and even Cadillac, a brand that had long represented sheer luxury, needed to downsize. Thus, the Seville was introduced as Cadillac's first compact luxury car, aimed at providing a more fuel-efficient, restrained alternative to its larger models. On paper, this made perfect sense. Consumers were demanding more efficiency, and Cadillac wanted to hold on to its status as the premier American luxury brand. But in execution, the Seville presented a number of design choices that left some fans scratching their heads. While Cadillac was aiming for a sleek, modern look, the Seville ended up looking more awkwardly boxy than elegant. The design was a sharp departure from the flowing lines and sweeping grandeur that had defined Cadillacs of the 1950s and 1960s. Instead, the Seville embraced sharp angles and stiff lines, giving the car a somewhat forced sense of formality. Its high rear end and squared-off edges made it look as if someone had taken one of Cadillac's bigger models and just chopped off the excess, shrinking it without much consideration for aesthetics. The car's profile was distinctly upright, lacking the graceful slope and low-slung grandeur that made earlier Cadillacs so visually compelling. While the Seville was positioned as a luxury car, it did not have the same kind of visual elegance that typically define luxury vehicles. The car's sharp angles and rigid silhouette gave it an almost utilitarian feel, certainly more restrained, but perhaps too restrained for the Cadillac nameplate. It was as if Cadillac, in an attempt to modernize and economize, had gone too far in stripping down the Seville's design. It was sophisticated, yes, but it lacked the flamboyant sense of indulgence that many Cadillac owners had come to expect. The Seville was also built on a modified platform borrowed from the Chevrolet Nova, a fact that didn't go unnoticed by automotive critics. While Cadillac made efforts to distinguish the Seville from its more modest sibling with upgraded materials and luxury appointments, some viewed the car as little more than a gussied-up Nova, an impression that undermined Cadillac's luxury credentials. The Seville's boxy shape, sharp angles, and high trunk lid gave it a stiff, formal appearance that seemed at odds with Cadillac's legacy of lush, flowing design. It was as if Cadillac couldn't quite reconcile the desire to be both compact and luxurious, resulting in a car that looked like a shrunken version of its more elegant predecessors, without capturing the grace or presence of the brand's larger models. The formal, almost conservative styling felt out of place in a decade when consumers were looking for more innovation and flair. Mechanically, the Seville was competent, featuring a 5.7-liter V8 engine that was relatively powerful for a car of its size. It delivered a smoother ride than one might expect from a car built on a smaller frame, and its handling was decent, especially compared to Cadillac's larger, more unwieldy models. Cadillac had also invested in better fuel efficiency, a smart move given the energy-conscious times, but the Seville's driving dynamics did little to elevate its awkward exterior design. Despite its somewhat ungainly looks, the Seville found its niche. It appealed to a new breed of luxury buyers who wanted the prestige of the Cadillac badge without the massive dimensions of Cadillac's other models. The Seville was smaller and more maneuverable than a Fleetwood or Eldorado, making it easier to handle in urban environments. It also attracted a younger, more affluent demographic that appreciated Cadillac's efforts to blend American luxury with European-style handling and refinement. In the end, the 1975 Cadillac Seville was a car of compromise, a Cadillac that sacrificed the brand's traditional grandiosity in favor of practicality. While it succeeded in carving out a new segment of luxury buyers, it did so at the cost of the visual allure that had defined Cadillac for decades. Its boxy, formal shape lacked the kind of timeless elegance that earlier Cadillacs had in abundance. And while it was efficient and modern, it didn't inspire the same kind of emotional attachment or admiration that the brand's classic models had. Looking back, the Seville can be seen as a harbinger of Cadillac's evolution, a sign of the brand's willingness to adapt to changing market conditions. But it also stands as an example of how downsizing luxury, both in terms of size and design, doesn't always yield graceful results. The 1973 Pontiac Grand Am was an ambitious attempt by Pontiac to merge the power and performance of a muscle car with the comfort and refinement of a luxury sedan. At the time, Pontiac was renowned for producing muscular, aggressive cars like the GTO, but the market was changing. The oil crisis, new emission standards, and consumer demand for more refined driving experiences created the need for a car that could offer both performance and luxury. Enter the Grand Am, a car that aimed to be the best of both worlds, but in reality, it ended up feeling like a design compromise, caught between two conflicting identities. From a design perspective, the 1973 Grand Am was bold, but not necessarily in a good way. The front end of the car featured Pontiac's trademark split grille, but it was heavily exaggerated, with a wide, gaping maw that seemed oversized for the rest of the vehicle's proportions. The grille almost looked like it belonged on a much larger vehicle and gave the car a somewhat cartoonish, aggressive face. For many, it was just too much. A muscle car's flair grafted onto a luxury sedan, resulting in a jarring design choice that didn't quite work in practice. The bumpers, too, were a point of contention. In response to new federal safety regulations, many cars in the early 1970s were saddled with bulky, oversized bumpers that were intended to meet crash standards, but often disrupted the aesthetic flow of the car. The Grand Am was no exception. Its front and rear bumpers were massive, awkwardly integrated into the body, and stuck out like sore thumbs. These large, clunky bumpers, while practical, made the car look heavier and bulkier than it needed to be, adding to its unbalanced appearance. One of the biggest problems with the Grand Am was that it lacked the sleekness and aggression that muscle cars of the era were known for. Cars like the Ford Mustang, Dodge Charger, and even Pontiac's own Firebird were low-slung, streamlined machines that looked fast standing still. The Grand Am, by contrast, was taller, boxier, and less cohesive in its design. It was clear that Pontiac was trying to blend luxury with muscle, but instead of complementing each other, the two design philosophies seemed to clash. The interior of the Grand Am was another example of the car's confused identity. On the one hand, Pontiac spared no effort in making the cabin feel luxurious. The seats were plush, comfortable, and covered in a soft vinyl material. The dashboard and instrument cluster were designed with a nod toward European luxury cars, giving the driver a sense of refinement. On the other hand, the car's sheer size and bulk made it feel more like a lumbering cruiser than a nimble performer. The luxury touches were appreciated, but they couldn't fully mask the fact that the Grand Am was not particularly fast or agile on the road. Under the hood, the Grand Am did come with some decent engine options. Buyers could choose from a 400 cubic inch V8 or a 455 cubic inch V8, both of which offered respectable power. However, by 1973, tightening emissions regulations and the oil crisis meant that the Grand Am, like many other American cars of the time, was saddled with lower horsepower and poorer fuel efficiency than its predecessors. So while the car might have looked like it could compete with true muscle cars, it often fell short in terms of performance. Handling was another area where the Grand Am didn't quite live up to its ambitions. The car was heavy, and despite Pontiac's best efforts to refine the suspension for a smoother, more comfortable ride, the Grand Am never felt as responsive or agile as it should have. Its large, cumbersome body made it more suited for straight-line cruising than for the sharp, thrilling cornering that muscle car enthusiasts craved. In fairness, Pontiac did succeed in creating a car that was comfortable and had a degree of luxury, something that might have appealed to buyers who wanted the muscle car experience, but didn't want to sacrifice ride comfort. However, the Grand Am's lack of a clear identity left it in an awkward position. It wasn't quite a luxury car, and it wasn't quite a muscle car, and that lack of focus hurt its appeal. The 1973 Grand Am also faced stiff competition from within Pontiac's own lineup. The Firebird and Trans Am were still available for buyers looking for real performance, and the Bonneville and Grand Prix offered better options for those seeking true luxury. This internal competition made it difficult for the Grand Am to carve out a distinct niche in the market, and its confused design didn't help. Looking back, the 1973 Pontiac Grand Am represents an interesting moment in automotive history, where manufacturers were trying to navigate the rapidly changing landscape of the 1970s. The car's awkward proportions, exaggerated styling, and bulky bumpers made it a design misstep, while its performance was hampered by the challenges of the time. The 1979 Lincoln Continental Mark V was the epitome of over-the-top luxury excess that defined American cars in the late 1970s. In an era where bigger was considered better, the Mark V was among the biggest and most audacious personal luxury coupes on the road. With a length that rivaled a small yacht, lavish ornamentation, and enough chrome to blind a passerby on a sunny day, it was a car that embraced excess in every conceivable way. While some admired its unapologetic grandeur, to others it was a rolling symbol of automotive absurdity, a caricature of luxury that hadn't quite caught up to the changing times. At nearly 19 feet long, the Mark V was enormous by any measure, dwarfing nearly every other car on the road. Its sheer size alone made it a challenge to park, maneuver, and even drive in urban environments, where its bulk felt completely out of place. The car's immense proportions made it look less like a sleek personal coupe and more like a land yacht. A fitting description, given that it seemed better suited for leisurely highway cruising than for anything involving agility or practicality. The exterior of the Mark V was where things got truly outrageous. Every inch of the car was adorned with design flourishes that screamed excess. The massive front grille, framed by chrome and crowned with a prominent Lincoln emblem, gave the car a regal, almost pretentious presence. The iconic opera windows, small circular or oval windows set into the rear pillars, were a hallmark of Lincoln's design language during this era. But on the Mark V, they only added to the sense of overdone luxury. The vinyl roof, another feature that was supposed to signify high-end elegance, covered the top half of the car and gave it a two-tone appearance that bordered on gaudy. Chrome was perhaps the defining material of the Mark V's design. It was everywhere, from the bumpers to the trim, to the door handles, to the thick accent lines running the length of the car. If you wanted to know what peak American luxury looked like in the late 1970s, this was it. Chrome, vinyl, and more chrome. It was a visual assault of shiny materials that didn't always work harmoniously, but did scream luxury in the loudest possible way. The Mark V's interior was just as excessive as its exterior. The plush leather seats, deep carpeting, and faux wood trim all worked together to create an environment that was meant to feel like a first-class cabin on wheels. Lincoln took great pride in offering a wide array of customization options, including special designer series editions, where buyers could select interior materials and colors based on the aesthetic preferences of famous designers like Bill Blass and Givenchy. These editions were supposed to give the car an air of high fashion and exclusivity, but in many cases, the results were a bit gaudy, with clashing color schemes and materials that felt more like they belonged in a flashy lounge than in a refined automobile. Under the hood, the Mark V was equipped with either a 400 cubic inch V8 or a 460 cubic inch V8 engine, both of which provided adequate power for a car of its size, but did little to mask its bulk or improve its performance. By 1979, tightening emissions regulations had strangled horsepower figures across the industry, and the Mark V was no exception. The once mighty V8s had been neutered by emissions controls, and while the car could still cruise comfortably at highway speeds, it was no longer the high-performance machine that luxury car buyers might have expected in earlier decades. Driving the Mark V was less an exercise in performance and more about comfort and presence. The car's suspension was soft and floaty, designed to glide over road imperfections and deliver the smoothest possible ride. In that sense, the Mark V succeeded, It was like driving a giant, leather-lined sofa. However, its handling was ponderous, to say the least. The car's massive weight and length made it feel like steering a boat, with slow, imprecise responses to driver input. Tight corners were an ordeal, and parallel parking was a nightmare. In the city, the Mark V felt completely out of its element, its bulk and weight making it hard to navigate through narrow streets or busy traffic. Fuel economy was another glaring issue for the Mark V. By 1979, the oil crisis had already forced American automakers to rethink their approach to fuel efficiency. But the Mark V remained stubbornly out of touch with the new reality. Its massive V8s guzzled fuel at an alarming rate, and with its weight and size, it was one of the least fuel-efficient cars on the road. At a time when consumers were beginning to look for smaller, more economical vehicles, the Mark V stood as a relic of a bygone era, a monument to American excess in a world that was increasingly valuing practicality. The 1977 Chevrolet Caprice Classic is a prime example of how the automotive landscape of the 1970s embraced size and boldness, sometimes at the expense of style and practicality. It was a car that seemed determined to prove bigger was better, though not everyone agreed with the results. With its enormous boxy frame, exaggerated fender skirts, and design choices that leaned heavily into the excesses of the era, the Caprice Classic epitomized the quirky, oversized family car that defined much of American automotive culture in the late 70s. At first glance, the 1977 Caprice Classic looked like it could tow a house. Its bulky and square body, combined with its long, wide frame, gave it an imposing presence on the road. This was not a car that blended into traffic. It stood out in a way that felt almost out of place as the industry slowly started inching toward more compact, fuel-efficient vehicles. The Caprice wasn't about subtlety or finesse. It was about making a statement that could be seen and felt from a block away. One of the most distinctive and frankly goofiest elements of the Caprice Classic's design was its oversized fender skirts, which partially covered the rear wheels and gave the car a peculiar, old-fashioned look. These skirts, meant to evoke a sense of streamlined elegance, ended up making the car look more cumbersome and outdated than sleek. Instead of recalling the graceful lines of earlier luxury models, they exaggerated the car's already bulky profile and made it feel unnecessarily heavy, as if the car was weighed down by its own ambition to look prestigious. The Caprice Classic also embraced the squared-off, boxy design aesthetic that was common in the 1970s. But on this car, it felt particularly extreme. Its flat, high hood and straight edges gave it a rigid, almost fortress-like appearance, sacrificing any sense of fluidity or grace in favor of sheer mass. The rear of the car, with its vertical taillights and blocky trunk, added to the car's awkward proportions. It was a car designed to dominate the road through sheer size, but in doing so, it lost the design cohesion that made earlier Chevrolets so appealing. Instead, the Caprice Classic felt like it was trying to mimic luxury by amplifying size, without understanding that elegance often comes from balance, not bulk. Inside, the Caprice Classic continued its theme of excess. The interior was spacious, so much so that it felt more like sitting in a living room than in a car. But while it offered plenty of room for passengers and cargo, the interior design didn't exude the luxury one might expect from such a large vehicle. It was filled with large cushioned seats, thick carpeting, and fake wood paneling that was meant to create a sense of opulence, but instead came across as dated and kitschy, even by the standards of the 1970s. The car was comfortable, sure, but it wasn't refined. It was more about quantity than quality, and that was evident in both its design and its ride. Under the hood, the 1977 Caprice Classic was powered by a range of V8 engines, including a 305 cubic inch and a 350 cubic inch option. While these engines provided decent power for a car of its size, the Caprice was never designed to be a performance machine. It was all about smooth, quiet cruising, perfect for long highway drives, but not exactly agile or responsive in city driving. The car's handling was floaty, with a suspension system designed to absorb road imperfections at the cost of precise control. Taking sharp corners in the Caprice could feel like navigating a boat around a tight bend, as the car leaned and swayed in ways that didn't inspire confidence. Fuel economy was another issue for the Caprice Classic. Like many cars of its era, it was a gas guzzler, churning through fuel at a rate that became increasingly problematic as the oil crisis of the 1970s prompted consumers to seek more fuel-efficient alternatives. For families used to driving big, comfortable cars, the Caprice was still an option. But it was clear that its time in the spotlight was waning as the automotive world began to shift towards smaller, more efficient vehicles. One area where the Caprice Classic did succeed, though, was in its ability to transport a lot of people and things. This was a car made for road trips and large families, with a cavernous trunk that could swallow luggage for a week-long vacation and an interior roomy enough to fit the entire family without anyone feeling cramped. It was, in that sense, a practical car, if your idea of practicality included a vehicle that took up almost 2 parking spaces and guzzled gas at an alarming rate. Despite its bulk and awkward design, the 1977 Caprice Classic did maintain some popularity during its time, largely because it was a dependable family car. However, as the decade progressed, it became clear that cars like the Caprice were dinosaurs in a changing world. The 1978 Mercury Zephyr Z7 stands as an intriguing example of automotive ambition gone awry, an attempt to capture the essence of sporty styling within a compact framework that ultimately left many scratching their heads. In a decade where automotive design was exploring a range of bold shapes and ideas, the Zephyr Z7's mixed messages manifested in its awkward proportions and confused aesthetics. At first glance, the Zephyr Z7's design intended to project a sense of sporty elegance, but it ultimately fell short. The car featured a long hood that seemed to stretch endlessly, giving it a somewhat imposing front profile. This long hood, while an attempt to evoke a feeling of power and speed, did little to complement the rest of the vehicle's design. Instead of creating a cohesive look, it contributed to an overall impression that something was amiss. The front end, with its sharp angles and distinctive grille, tried to command attention, but often looked out of place against the backdrop of the car's other features. The sloping roofline aimed to suggest a sleek and aerodynamic silhouette, reminiscent of European sports coupes that were gaining popularity at the time. However, this roofline culminated in a tiny rear end that felt almost like an afterthought, undermining the intended sporty look. The diminutive rear was not only visually unbalanced, but also limited the car's functionality. The compact size of the trunk space left drivers feeling cramped when it came to carrying luggage or everyday items. In a time when American consumers were increasingly focused on practicality and spaciousness, the Zephyr Z7's lack of usable cargo space was a significant drawback. Additionally, the rear of the Zephyr Z7, with its high tail and subtle curves, added to the overall awkwardness. The design choices made here did not harmonize with the sporty aspirations of the front. Instead, it almost seemed like the designers were grappling with conflicting ideas. Part sleek sports car, part compact runabout, resulting in a car that simply did not know what it wanted to be. This disjointed approach left the Zephyr Z7 with an identity crisis that made it unappealing to potential buyers. Under the hood, the Mercury Zephyr Z7 offered a variety of engine options, including inline-6 and V8 engines. While these engines provided decent performance for a compact car, they did not translate into the exhilarating drive that the sporty aesthetic suggested. Instead, drivers often found themselves in a vehicle that, while certainly capable, lacked the dynamic handling and spirited performance one would expect from a car branded as sporty. The car's handling was adequate, but it didn't inspire confidence in the way that true performance vehicles do. Many found the ride to be more comfortable than engaging, which contributed to the car's inability to fully deliver on its sporty promise. Inside, the Zephyr Z7 was designed to offer a blend of comfort and style, but it too suffered from a lack of cohesiveness. The interior featured a variety of materials and designs, which, while aiming for a modern feel, came off as piecemeal and haphazard. The dashboard had a mix of dials and gauges that seemed to compete for attention rather than work in harmony. The seating was generally comfortable, but again, the compact nature of the car meant that rear passengers often felt cramped. This focus on creating a sporty persona did not translate into an interior that matched that ambition, leaving passengers feeling somewhat neglected in terms of space and comfort. Despite its design shortcomings, the Mercury Zephyr Z7 did manage to carve out a niche during its brief production run. It appealed to a demographic that valued style over substance. Those who were drawn to the aesthetic of a sporty, compact vehicle, even if the driving experience did not deliver on that promise. However, as the automotive landscape continued to evolve, the Zephyr Z7 began to fade into the background, overshadowed by competitors that better understood the balance of form and function. In hindsight, the 1978 Mercury Zephyr Z7 serves as a fascinating study of design ambition and market expectation. It encapsulates a time in automotive history where manufacturers were experimenting with new ideas, often without fully understanding how those ideas would translate into a cohesive product. While the Zephyr Z7 remains an interesting chapter in the story of compact cars, it also stands as a reminder of the challenges that come with blending sporty aesthetics with practical performance. The result was a car that, despite its unique intentions, ultimately left a legacy of confusion and disappointment. The 1970 Ford Torino King Cobra was a fascinating chapter in the annals of American automotive history, showcasing the bold ambitions and eccentricities of the muscle car era. Conceived as a high-performance version of the already well-regarded Torino, the King Cobra was intended to compete in NASCAR, tapping into the growing popularity of stock car racing at the time. However, this one-off experiment ultimately became a cautionary tale of design gone awry, marked by its decidedly unconventional aesthetics that left enthusiasts both intrigued and bewildered. At first glance, the King Cobra's design was striking, characterized by its elongated nose that seemed to stretch into the horizon. This distinctive feature was intended to give the car an aggressive stance, but instead it resulted in an appearance that resembled a cartoonish caricature of a snake ready to strike. The massive grille, with its oversized proportions, accentuated this resemblance, making it appear as though the car was perpetually poised to swallow whatever lay in its path. While the intention behind such a design may have been to project power and ferocity, the execution came off as more whimsical than intimidating. The front-end styling was perhaps the most polarizing aspect of the King Cobra. While muscle cars of the era were typically celebrated for their muscular, chiseled looks, the King Cobra's exaggerated features seemed to depart from that tradition. The design choices made by Ford stylists, including the pronounced fenders and pronounced lines, were bold but ultimately fell flat in their attempt to convey speed and performance. The overall effect was akin to a playful interpretation of what a muscle car should look like, rather than a serious contender on the racetrack or the road. Under the hood, the King Cobra was no slouch. It was outfitted with a powerful 429 cubic inch V8 engine, capable of delivering robust performance. This engine choice aligned with the expectations of muscle car enthusiasts, promising exhilarating acceleration and a thrilling driving experience. However, the performance was somewhat overshadowed by the car's outlandish appearance. Drivers may have found themselves more focused on the attention their vehicle attracted rather than the raw power it could unleash. Interestingly, the King Cobra was not just about style, it was also equipped with features intended to enhance its racing pedigree. From the modified suspension to the improved braking system, Ford designed the King Cobra with track performance in mind. However, the combination of these performance enhancements with the peculiar design left potential buyers and racing enthusiasts scratching their heads. Many wondered if such a car could truly perform well on the racetrack, when it looked more like a whimsical art project than a serious racing machine. The King Cobra was also conceived during a time when the muscle car segment was beginning to feel the impact of changing regulations and shifting consumer preferences. As the early 1970s approached, tightening emission standards and rising fuel prices began to change the landscape for American automakers. In this context, the King Cobra's extravagant styling may have seemed even more out of place. While it was undoubtedly a product of its time, it was also a reflection of the increasingly uncertain future of the muscle car market. Ultimately, the Ford Torino King Cobra never made it to mass production, and its one-off status only added to its mystique. It was a bold experiment that epitomized the adventurous spirit of the late 1960s and early 1970s, a time when automotive designers were willing to take risks and push boundaries. However, the King Cobra's bizarre styling and overly ambitious design choices led to its downfall. In the eyes of many, it became a symbol of how creative intent could sometimes misfire, resulting in a vehicle that, while interesting, was simply too goofy for the road. Today, the King Cobra occupies a unique space in the hearts of automotive enthusiasts and collectors. Its rarity and distinctive design make it a sought-after piece of automotive history, a conversation starter at car shows and classic car events. While it may not have been a commercial success or a practical vehicle for everyday driving, the Ford Torino King Cobra remains a testament to the wild and whimsical spirit of a bygone era, a reminder of the bold experimentation that characterized American muscle cars during their heyday. It serves as a curious artifact of automotive ambition, forever etched in the annals of car culture for its unapologetic goofiness and striking visual presence. The 1976 Chevrolet Chevelle Laguna Type S3 represents a unique moment in American automotive history, capturing both the aspirations and challenges of mid-1970s car design. Chevrolet aimed to blend performance with style in this iteration of the Chevelle, a nameplate that had long been associated with muscle car prowess. However, the final product ultimately fell short of expectations, marked by its conspicuous design flaws and an identity crisis that left it looking bloated rather than sporty. From a visual standpoint, the Chevelle Laguna Type S3 aimed for a sporty aesthetic, but ended up embracing a curiously awkward appearance. One of the most striking aspects of the car was its massive rubber bumpers, a direct result of new federal safety regulations aimed at improving crashworthiness. While safety is undoubtedly important, the oversized bumpers transform the car's proportions, making it appear more cumbersome than agile. The design philosophy of the time often prioritized safety features, sometimes at the expense of visual appeal, and the Laguna Type S3 was no exception. What could have been sleek lines in an athletic stance morphed into a bulky silhouette, leading to a disconnection between the car's intended sporty identity and its actual appearance. These substantial bumpers not only contributed to the car's bulk, but also created an imbalance in its overall design. The exaggerated front and rear bumpers, while fulfilling regulatory requirements, made the car look like it had been dressed in oversized armor. This sense of excess was not only visually off-putting, but also left a lingering question about the performance credentials of the vehicle. Enthusiasts and casual observers alike were left wondering how a car that aspired to embody sportiness could appear so encumbered by its safety features. The body of the Laguna Type S3 was characterized by an exaggerated design that struggled to find a cohesive identity. While the Chevelle had a reputation for being a muscle car, the Laguna variant veered towards the middle ground, trying to be both sporty and practical. This resulted in a design that lacked the crisp, aggressive lines that defined true performance vehicles of the era. Instead, it embodied a transitional phase of automotive design, where the lines between sporty and utilitarian began to blur. As the muscle car era waned in the wake of rising insurance rates and fuel prices, the Laguna Type S3 attempted to capture a market that was uncertain about its identity. Under the hood, the Chevelle Laguna Type S-3 was equipped with a range of engine options that reflected the changing times. While earlier models boasted powerful V8 engines, this version had to contend with stricter emissions regulations and shifting consumer preferences. The performance potential was diminished, and while buyers could still find respectable horsepower figures, it often came at the cost of the spirited driving experience that the Chevelle lineage was known for. The car's performance felt somewhat compromised, mirroring the broader trend within the industry as manufacturers scrambled to adapt to new realities. Additionally, the Laguna Type S3 was marketed as a car that offered a blend of comfort and performance, but this message often fell flat in execution. The interior aimed to provide a sporty atmosphere, yet the focus on comfort sometimes resulted in a lack of the engaging driving experience that enthusiasts craved. Drivers found themselves sitting behind a steering wheel that felt more like a compromise between luxury and sport, leaving them wanting a more connected driving experience. In an era when driving excitement was paramount, the Laguna Type S-3 seemed to miss the mark. Despite its shortcomings, the Chevelle Laguna Type S3 did carve out a niche in the automotive landscape of the mid-1970s. It became a symbol of a transitional period in American car culture, where manufacturers were trying to navigate changing consumer preferences and regulatory demands. Though it may not have achieved the sporty image it aspired to, the Laguna Type S3 nevertheless left an indelible mark, representing the complexities of an era that sought to balance safety, style, and performance. Today, the Chevelle Laguna Type S-3 has developed a kind of cult following among automotive enthusiasts. While it may not be the poster child for classic American muscle, its distinctive design and historical significance granted a unique place in car history. Collectors often appreciate the Laguna for what it represents, a snapshot of an evolving automotive industry during a time of uncertainty. As a result, it stands as a reminder of the trials and tribulations faced by manufacturers and drivers alike in their quest for the ideal blend of performance, safety, and style during the transformative 1970s. The 1971 AMC Hornet SC/360 stands as a fascinating example of the experimental spirit of the early 1970s American automotive landscape. Born from AMC's ambition to create a compact car that could deliver muscle car performance, the Hornet SC360 aimed to cater to a market that was beginning to see a shift in consumer preferences. However, what emerged from this vision was a car that embodied both potential and peculiarity, leaving an indelible mark on the muscle car scene while also raising eyebrows for its unconventional design. At first glance, the Hornet SC360's compact dimensions can be seen as both a strength and a weakness. AMC was attempting to tap into the burgeoning compact car market, which promised efficiency and practicality in a time when fuel prices were beginning to creep upward and the muscle car era was facing significant challenges. However, this compactness created a peculiar juxtaposition when paired with the muscle car aspirations of the SC/360. The car's small, boxy frame clashed with the robust performance it aimed to deliver, resulting in a vehicle that visually appeared more like a toy than a serious contender in the muscle car arena. The standout feature of the SC360 was its unmistakable hood scoop, which signaled the presence of power lurking beneath its compact exterior. While the hood scoop is a hallmark of muscle cars, suggesting an aggressive performance potential, it seemed oddly exaggerated on the Hornet's modest frame. This design choice gave the car a cartoonish flair, detracting from the serious muscle car vibe that enthusiasts often sought. Instead of conveying raw power, the oversized hood scoop turned the Hornet SC360 into a caricature of a muscle car, inviting playful comparisons rather than reverence. Under the hood, the SC360 housed a 360 cubic inch V8 engine, which was a serious power plant for a car of its size. This engine could deliver respectable horsepower, allowing the Hornet to perform well against many of its competitors on the road. Despite its playful exterior, the SC360 offered a performance experience that could rival more established muscle cars of the era, demonstrating AMC's commitment to marrying power with a compact design. However, the dichotomy between its performance and quirky styling left many potential buyers scratching their heads. Could they take this muscle car seriously when it looks so odd? The interior of the Hornet SC/360 also reflected the quirky ethos of the car. While the compact design allowed for a snug driver and passenger experience, the materials and overall aesthetics felt dated compared to its more luxurious competitors. AMC's emphasis on performance often came at the expense of refinement, and this was evident in the Hornet SC360. For buyers looking for a sporty feel, the seating and dashboard offered little in terms of excitement, further muddying the waters of what the car was meant to be. As a result, the AMC Hornet SC/360 struggled to find its footing in a rapidly changing automotive landscape. The early 1970s marked a time of flux in consumer preferences, with buyers becoming more conscious of fuel economy and practicality in their vehicles. The SC360's ambitious performance may have been well-suited for a muscle car audience, but its compact size and playful design failed to resonate with those seeking a more serious driving experience. Instead of standing alongside the muscle car heavyweights of the era, It became more of a curiosity, often dismissed as a novelty rather than a legitimate contender. Despite its shortcomings, the Hornet SC/360 has since garnered a cult following among automotive enthusiasts. Today, it represents a unique intersection of design and performance, capturing the spirit of a time when manufacturers were willing to take risks in an effort to redefine the automobile. Collectors appreciate the SC360 for its rarity, quirkiness, and the glimpse it provides into AMC's innovative approach to car design during a tumultuous period. The legacy of the AMC Hornet SC360 serves as a reminder that the automotive landscape is not just defined by perfection, but also by experimentation and the sometimes goofy results that come from it. In the end, the SC/360 stands out not just for its oddities, but for its place in the narrative of American muscle cars, demonstrating that sometimes a little quirkiness can make a car memorable, if not entirely serious. It encapsulates the charm of an era where performance and design didn't always align perfectly, resulting in vehicles that were as much conversation starters as they were capable machines. The Hornet SC/360 will always be remembered as a unique chapter in the book of American automotive history, an endearing blend of ambition, quirkiness, and an irrepressible spirit of innovation. The 1978 Dodge Magnum XE is often remembered as a car that tried to embody the essence of personal luxury while simultaneously flirting with a futuristic aesthetic that unfortunately fell short of its ambitions. As a product of the late 1970s, the Magnum XE was born into a tumultuous time for the American automotive industry, characterized by fluctuating fuel prices, changing consumer preferences, and an increasingly competitive market. In this landscape, Dodge aimed to carve out a niche for itself with the Magnum XE, but the execution of its design left much to be desired. At first glance, the Magnum XE presented a striking silhouette with its long, sloping hood and fastback rear. This design was meant to evoke a sense of speed and elegance, aligning with the growing trend of personal luxury coupes that were gaining popularity during the era. However, while the sleek lines intended to suggest a sporty character, the proportions often came across as awkward and unbalanced. The long hood, while visually appealing in concept, seemed disproportionate when combined with the car's stocky body, leading to a visual tension that detracted from the overall aesthetic. One of the most notable features of the Magnum XE was its oversized grille and headlights, which contributed to its peculiar appearance. The grille, which was more prominent than necessary, gave the car an almost cartoonish look, while the large headlights added to the impression of a face that was struggling to find its identity. Instead of creating an aggressive or sophisticated front-end design, the overall effect was that of a misguided attempt at modernity, as if the car was trying too hard to blend various design elements without achieving a cohesive look. This clashing aesthetic often led onlookers to question whether the Magnum XE was a serious contender in the personal luxury market or merely a novelty. Inside, the Magnum XE sought to deliver a comfortable and luxurious experience. Dodge included features aimed at enhancing driver and passenger comfort, such as plush seating, a well-appointed dashboard, and an array of options designed to provide a sense of opulence. However, while the interior may have had good intentions, it often felt dated compared to competitors that embraced more contemporary designs and higher quality materials. The overall effect was one of mediocrity, as the Magnum XE struggled to compete with luxury brands that were more adept at delivering a refined experience. Performance-wise, the Magnum XE was equipped with a range of engine options, including V8 configurations that promised adequate power. However, the reality of driving the Magnum often fell short of expectations. The vehicle's handling could be described as unremarkable, with steering that felt heavy and a suspension system that didn't quite inspire confidence during spirited driving. While the Magnum XE aimed to position itself as a sporty coupe, its performance characteristics often betrayed that ambition, leading to a driving experience that felt more akin to a grand tourer than a true sports car. The Dodge Magnum XE ultimately reflected the challenges faced by American automakers during the late 1970s. As consumers grew more discerning about fuel efficiency and practicality, personal luxury coupes found themselves in a precarious position. The Magnum XE, while trying to capture the essence of a performance-oriented luxury car, found itself at odds with shifting consumer priorities. Instead of standing out in a crowded market, it became another example of how ambitious designs could falter under the weight of unrealistic expectations. In retrospect, the Magnum XE has developed a cult following among automotive enthusiasts who appreciate its quirky styling and the unique blend of characteristics it embodies. While it may not have achieved the status of a classic in the same vein as other luxury coupes of the era, its distinctive design and the stories surrounding its production have granted it a place in the hearts of collectors and car aficionados. The Magnum XE serves as a reminder of the bold experimentation that characterized the automotive industry during the 1970s, a time when design choices were driven more by a sense of ambition than by established norms. Today, the 1978 Dodge Magnum XE stands as a curious relic of a bygone era, embodying the spirit of a time when car manufacturers were willing to take risks in their designs, even if those risks didn't always pay off. Its unusual proportions and quirky aesthetics may have led to confusion during its time, but they also contribute to its charm and uniqueness. The Magnum XE is more than just a car. It's a snapshot of an era defined by experimentation, aspiration, and the occasional misstep, qualities that make it an intriguing subject for those who appreciate the rich tapestry of automotive history. The 1974 AMC Matador X Coupe stands as an emblematic example of the late 1970s American automotive design, a period when manufacturers were grappling with changing consumer preferences and new safety regulations. Launched as part of AMC's effort to invigorate its lineup with a sportier, more dynamic vehicle, the Matador X Coupe ultimately fell short of its ambitious goals, instead becoming a curious blend of design missteps and market miscalculations. From the moment you set eyes on the Matador X Coupe, its strikingly exaggerated features are hard to ignore. The oversized grille dominates the front end, almost comically so, giving the car an imposing presence that seems at odds with its compact coupe classification. Instead of projecting a sense of aggressive sportiness, the massive grille combined with the awkwardly bulbous rear creates a disjointed appearance that leaves observers questioning the design rationale. While AMC aimed for a sporty aesthetic, the result felt more like a caricature than a refined performance vehicle. The overall proportions of the Matador X Coupe do little to alleviate its visual confusion. The pronounced curves of the rear end, which some might interpret as a nod to classic muscle car design, instead lend a sense of bulk that clashes with the sleek, flowing lines one would expect from a sporty coupe. This mismatch results in a silhouette that is more unbalanced than athletic, turning potential buyers away who might have otherwise been interested in a car that was marketed as a performance-oriented option. In many ways, the Matador X Coupe exemplified the struggle of automotive designers during this period, who were attempting to fuse form and function in a market that was becoming increasingly complicated. Inside the Matador X Coupe, the experience continued to reflect the mixed messages of its exterior. The interior was designed to cater to a sense of sportiness, featuring bucket seats and a driver-focused layout, but the execution felt lackluster. The dashboard, while functional, didn't offer the contemporary flair that many of its competitors boasted. Instead, it often came across as dated, with materials and finishes that lacked the sophistication expected in a sport coupe. This contributed to a sense of disappointment for drivers who anticipated a more exhilarating driving experience, given the coupe's sporty intentions. Performance-wise, the Matador X Coupe offered a range of engine options that included V8 configurations designed to provide adequate power for a car of its size. However, the execution was often underwhelming. Despite being marketed as a sporty coupe, the car struggled to deliver the kind of engaging driving experience that enthusiasts crave. Handling could be described as somewhat clumsy, with steering that didn't offer the feedback expected from a performance-oriented vehicle. The result was a car that felt more like a standard family coupe than the sporty alternative it was intended to be. The Matador X Coupe's marketing campaign sought to capitalize on the burgeoning interest in personal luxury and sporty designs, but the end product failed to resonate with consumers. Sales were lackluster, and the Matador X Coupe struggled to carve out a niche for itself amidst the competition. As a result, AMC faced challenges that would ultimately lead to a reevaluation of its design philosophy and product offerings. In retrospect, the 1974 AMC Matador X Coupe has earned a certain level of cult status among car enthusiasts, particularly those who appreciate the quirkiness of its design. While it may not have achieved commercial success, its unique aesthetic and the stories surrounding its production have granted it a place in the annals of automotive history. The Matador X Coupe serves as a reminder of a time when car manufacturers were willing to take risks with their designs, even if those risks didn't always translate to widespread appeal. Today, the Matador X Coupe stands as a fascinating artifact of the 1970s automotive landscape, embodying both the aspirations and missteps of an era defined by experimentation and bold choices. It reminds us that the journey of design is often fraught with challenges, and that sometimes the goofiest cars can leave the most lasting impressions. Its unique proportions and odd styling may have made it an easy target for criticism, but they also contribute to its charm and individuality, making it a memorable chapter in the history of American automobiles. In a world where conformity often reigns, the Matador X Coupe boldly embraced its eccentricity, ensuring it would never be forgotten. 1975 Ford Elite was an attempt by Ford to capture the growing market for personal luxury coupes during the mid-1970s, but instead of achieving the sleek elegance of its European counterparts, the Elite ended up embodying many of the era's excesses and design missteps. Though positioned as a more affordable alternative to the upscale Thunderbird and Lincoln Continental Mark IV, the Elite came across as bulky, awkward, and excessively adorned with chrome and other embellishments that didn't quite coalesce into a cohesive design. At first glance, the Elite was unmistakably a product of the 1970s, long, wide, and low-slung, with a front end that seemed to go on forever. The extended hood gave the car a disproportionate profile, making the already heavy-looking vehicle seem even more cumbersome. While long hoods were a common feature among luxury coupes of the time, designed to convey power and prestige, the Elite's stretched-out front seemed exaggerated and impractical. This effect was only worsened by the car's short, stubby rear, creating an unbalanced appearance that seemed to favor style over substance. But in an odd way, the Elite's design was also heavily weighed down by its attempts to look luxurious. Ford leaned hard into chrome accents, slathering the car's exterior with shiny details that, rather than adding refinement, made it appear more gaudy and overdone. The grille, a wide rectangular expanse framed by large chrome bezels, dominated the front of the car, giving it a face that was more garish than elegant. The vinyl roof, another popular feature at the time, added to the car's visual bulk, making it look top-heavy and contributing to its overall awkward aesthetic. Despite its attempts at European-inspired elegance, the Ford Elite fell victim to many of the design trends that were popular in American cars at the time, particularly those favoring size and flash over proportion and restraint. While European luxury cars of the era were often more compact, sleek, and aerodynamic, the Elite embodied the opposite, large, over-decorated, and lacking the grace that would define a truly refined luxury coupe. The wide body of the Elite, combined with its excessive use of chrome trim, vinyl accents, and opera windows, gave the car a bloated appearance. It seemed like Ford was trying to cram as many luxury features as possible into the vehicle's design, without paying enough attention to how all of these elements work together. The result was a car that felt more like a parody of luxury than the real thing, an almost cartoonish version of what a high-end coupe should be. Inside, the Ford Elite didn't fare much better. While the car boasted some of the comfort features that were expected in a personal luxury coupe, plush seats, power windows, and ample legroom, the interior design mirrored the exterior's over-the-top styling. Large swaths of fake wood paneling, vinyl trim, and plasticky controls created an atmosphere that felt more kitschy than luxurious. While it provided comfort and convenience, the overall execution lacked the refinement that buyers would find in European models or even in some of Ford's more expensive offerings. Performance-wise, the Elite wasn't built for speed or precision handling. It was powered by a variety of V8 engines, which provided decent power for the time, but its sheer size and weight made it feel sluggish and difficult to maneuver. Steering was vague, and handling was more akin to driving a land yacht than a nimble sports coupe. While the car could comfortably cruise on highways, it wasn't the kind of vehicle that inspired confidence or excitement behind the wheel. Fuel economy, like many cars of the era, was dismal, a significant drawback given the oil crisis that was taking place at the time. Despite its design flaws, the Ford Elite did have a brief moment of popularity, thanks in part to its lower price point compared to other luxury coupes. For buyers who wanted the look of a high-end car without the hefty price tag, the Elite offered an appealing compromise. However, its success was short-lived as the car was discontinued in 1976, just 2 years after its introduction, with Ford opting to refocus its efforts on more refined models. In retrospect, the 1975 Ford Elite stands as a symbol of the excesses of 1970s American car design. Big, brash, and overly adorned with chrome and vinyl. While it attempted to capture the allure of European luxury coupes, it ultimately missed the mark, ending up as an awkward, bulky vehicle that felt out of step with the more understated elegance of its contemporaries. For many, the Elite is remembered more for its goofy proportions and overly flashy design than for any lasting impact on the automotive world. The 1979 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Brougham is a car that tried to walk the fine line between classic American luxury and modern trends, but ultimately ended up feeling like a relic of an earlier era. While it was a popular model for its time, especially among those who valued comfort over cutting-edge style, the Cutlass Supreme Brougham's boxy design, faux wood paneling, and plush interior features made it seem outdated and, in many ways, a bit goofy by the late 70s. At the heart of the car's awkward aesthetic was its blocky, squared-off shape. While many American cars in the 1970s were large and boxy, the Cutlass Supreme Brougham took these design cues to the extreme. Its high, flat sides and tall roofline gave it a hefty, almost lumbering appearance, making it look more like a family sedan from the 60s than the sleek, aerodynamic cars that would soon dominate the market in the 80s. The car's profile seemed to ignore the growing trend towards smoother, more sculpted bodies, and instead doubled down on the boxy, rectangular look that had already started to feel stale. Adding to this somewhat stodgy appearance was the use of fake wood paneling along the sides of the car, a styling choice that had become popular in the 1950s and 60s, especially for station wagons and family vehicles. By 1979, however, this faux wood trim was beginning to feel like a throwback, especially on a car that was trying to position itself as a luxury vehicle. Instead of evoking a sense of elegance or craftsmanship, the wood paneling on the Cutlass Supreme Brougham looked more like a gimmick, something that only accentuated the car's outdated appearance. The interior of the Cutlass Supreme Brougham was another area where the car tried to exude luxury, but ended up feeling more old-fashioned and out of touch. The plush velour upholstery and overly padded seats were certainly comfortable, but they were also heavy-handed in their attempt to create a sense of opulence. The thick, pillowy seats may have been great for a long highway cruise, but they didn't do the car any favors in terms of style. Combined with an overabundance of chrome, fake wood trim, and square dashboard elements, the interior looked like it belonged more to a living room than to a modern automobile. It was cozy but far from chic, making the overall vibe of the car feel stuffy rather than sophisticated. Despite its visual awkwardness, the Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Brougham was still a solid car mechanically. It came equipped with a range of engine options, from smaller V6s to larger V8s, giving it decent performance for the time. The car was known for its smooth ride, which was one of the reasons why it appealed to an older demographic that valued comfort above all else. It wasn't built for speed or sharp handling, but it delivered a quiet and cushioned driving experience that was perfect for long-distance travel. This focus on comfort and practicality is probably why the car remained popular, despite its outdated styling. However, by 1979, the Cutlass Supreme Brougham was beginning to look and feel very much like a product of a bygone era. As the 1980s approached, the automotive world was moving towards smaller, more efficient cars with cleaner, more modern designs. The oil crises of the 1970s had also made fuel efficiency a top concern for many buyers, and the Cutlass Supreme Brougham, with its large size and less than impressive gas mileage, felt increasingly out of step with the times. Its heavy, oversized frame and luxury features seemed indulgent in a world that was quickly turning towards practicality and efficiency. In many ways, the 1979 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Brougham serves as a symbol of the end of an era in American car design. A time when bigger was always better, and when luxury was defined by how much chrome and how many plush cushions could be packed into a vehicle. By the end of the decade, cars like the Cutlass Supreme were starting to feel like dinosaurs, relics of a time when gas was cheap and comfort was king. Today, the 1979 Cutlass Supreme Brougham has a certain charm for collectors and enthusiasts who appreciate its vintage appeal. The boxy, squared-off look that seemed so awkward back then now evokes a sense of nostalgia for a time when cars were made to be big, bold, and brimming with personality. The velour seats, the chrome details, and the wood paneling, all of which felt out of place in the late 70s, are now celebrated as quintessential elements of the American automotive experience from that era. For those who lived through the era, the Cutlass Supreme Brougham might even bring back fond memories of family road trips or Sunday drives down the boulevard, where the comfort of those pillowy seats and the soft hum of the V8 made every journey feel like a luxurious escape. But for anyone looking at it with modern eyes, it's hard to deny that this car was more than a little goofy in its design. The 1974 Dodge Dart Hang 10 was Dodge's attempt to tap into the surf culture that had become popular in the 1970s. But the execution resulted in a car that felt more like a novelty than a serious beach cruiser. While the Dodge Dart was known for being a reliable and practical vehicle, the Hang 10 edition took things in a much different direction by incorporating bold design choices that some found more amusing than appealing. The exterior of the Hang 10 was instantly recognizable due to its colorful surfing-themed decals. Stripes in bright blues, reds, and oranges ran along the car's sides, clearly designed to evoke the carefree vibe of the beach. These vibrant designs may have been fun in theory, but in practice they clashed with the Dart's more conventional structure, making the car look more like a rolling advertisement for a surf shop than an actual road vehicle. The interior carried on the same theme, with upholstery that was equally as bold. The seats were covered in fabric patterned with bright, swirling colors reminiscent of beach towels. This loud, attention-grabbing design made the interior of the car feel more like a themed lounge than the inside of a sedan. The red, white, and blue color palette gave the impression that the car was trying a bit too hard to lean into the surfing culture it was trying to represent. One feature that seemed to add to the car's beach-going intentions was its folding rear seat, a practical addition that was meant to allow drivers to store surfboards inside the vehicle. While the idea was sound, it was a bit impractical considering that most surfers strap their boards to the roof rather than trying to squeeze them into the back seat of a compact car. This further highlighted the mismatch between the Dart's body style and the Hang 10's attempts to evoke the spirit of the beach. Mechanically, the Dodge Dart Hang 10 wasn't any different from the regular Dart models of the time. It offered the same dependable engine options, including the 225 cubic inch Slant 6 or the larger 318 cubic inch V8. Despite the sporty image Dodge was aiming for with the Hang 10, the car wasn't exactly built for high-performance driving. It was, at its core, a dependable and moderately powered compact car that had been given a colorful makeover. The Dodge Dart Hang 10 was an example of how automakers in the 1970s were willing to experiment with special editions and bold designs in an attempt to capture the attention of younger buyers. However, the Hang 10's bright colors, surfing decals, and beach-themed interior seemed more like a corporate attempt to appeal to a youth market than a genuine representation of surf culture. The Dart itself was a fine car, but this particular edition seemed to miss the mark. Over time, the Hang 10 edition has become something of a curiosity in automotive history. Today, it's appreciated more for its quirky, nostalgic charm than for its functionality or practicality. The bold and playful designs that once made it seem out of place now make it a fun reminder of the daring, sometimes outlandish design choices that characterized 1970s cars. For collectors and enthusiasts, the Hang 10 is a rare find, a car that embodies the colorful spirit of its era. It may not have been a perfect beach cruiser, but it certainly stands out as a fun piece of automotive history. The 1979 Chrysler LeBaron is often remembered as a car that tried to embody the spirit of luxury in a more compact and fuel-efficient package, but its design choices left much to be desired. This was a time when American automakers were responding to changing market demands due to the oil crisis of the 1970s. While many cars of the era were downsizing to conserve fuel, they often sacrificed aesthetics and quality in the process. And the LeBaron became a prime example of this transition going somewhat wrong. One of the most striking features of the 1979 LeBaron was its boxy, angular shape. While it wasn't unusual for cars of the late 70s to have more geometric designs, the LeBaron took it to an extreme. The car's sharp edges and flat surfaces gave it an almost toy-like appearance, as though it had been sculpted out of blocks rather than designed with aerodynamics or elegance in mind. This blocky look made it seem awkwardly proportioned and far less sophisticated than the grand luxury cars Chrysler had produced in previous decades. Adding to its cartoonish appearance was the fake woodside paneling, which was a popular trend during this period, but often detracted from the overall look of a car. For the LeBaron, this faux wood trim was an attempt to inject a sense of classic station wagon charm, but it only ended up making the car look cheap and outdated. The wood paneling, set against the harsh, boxy lines of the car, made it look like a scaled-down family wagon trying to wear the costume of something grander than it was. This was a far cry from the refined image Chrysler hoped to project. Despite these stylistic missteps, Chrysler marketed the LeBaron as a luxury vehicle, emphasizing comfort and features over performance. Inside, the car was designed to offer a plush experience, with soft seating and an array of conveniences meant to cater to a more affluent market. However, the interior materials often fell short of true luxury standards, with vinyl and plastics that lacked the premium feel of competitors. Chrysler's desire to balance affordability with luxury resulted in a car that, while comfortable, didn't live up to the high-end experience that buyers might have expected. Under the hood, the LeBaron wasn't particularly impressive either. With the focus on fuel efficiency during the late 70s, the car's engine options were limited to smaller, more economical choices, such as a 3.7-liter slant 6 or a 5.2-liter V8. While these engines were reliable, they didn't deliver the kind of power or driving excitement that might have made the car's awkward appearance more forgivable. The V8 engine provided modest performance, but it wasn't enough to lift the LeBaron out of its identity crisis as a luxury car with underwhelming capabilities. The LeBaron's awkward mix of trying to be both efficient and luxurious ultimately made it one of the more forgettable models of the era. It lacked the sleek elegance of true luxury cars, and its blocky, uninspired design prevented it from standing out in a positive way. The car also faced stiff competition from more refined imports that were becoming increasingly popular with American buyers who wanted both style and substance in their vehicles. Chrysler's LeBaron may have been a well-meaning attempt to adapt to the times, but its compromises in design and performance left it feeling like a watered-down version of what it could have been. Despite its shortcomings, the 1979 LeBaron does hold a place in automotive history as a car that reflects the transitional nature of the late 1970s. It's a reminder of how difficult it was for American automakers to strike the right balance between the luxury buyers wanted and the efficiency they needed. While it may not have been the most glamorous or successful car Chrysler ever produced, the LeBaron remains a symbol of a specific era in the industry, a time when automakers were experimenting, sometimes with goofy results, to keep up with changing consumer demands. In retrospect, the 1979 Chrysler LeBaron's charm lies in its earnestness. It tried to be modern, luxurious, and practical all at once, but ended up falling short in each category. For car enthusiasts today, it represents a nostalgic reminder of a time when bold, sometimes odd design choices were embraced in the hopes of capturing a new kind of car buyer. While it may not have been a hit in its day, the LeBaron's quirky appearance and ambitious intentions ensure that it will never be entirely forgotten. These cars from the 1970s may have been bold attempts to stand out, but many of them missed the mark. Their goofy designs, awkward proportions, and quirky features make them some of the most memorable and forgettable cars of the decade.